Dear Fragments of Silicon, what should I do when the government tells me to update Windows?
All right, welcome to another episode of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Let's get to the news. Let's see. Petty, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, I got that medical bill for the physical therapy sorted out.
Thank
So,
God.
yeah. And other than that, it's been mostly quiet all week, except we had a snowstorm, and my dad slipped on the stairs and sprained his ankle. So
That's bad.
yeah. So yeah, that's been fun. And then as far as gaming stuff goes, I've been trying to play some more Kingdom Hearts 3 because Remind is coming out later this month.
Mm.
And yeah, I guess next victim.
Uh, right, Galax?
Um, I guess not a whole ton going on here. We're trying to change over payroll systems at work, and I help with that, and it's not going well, so we end up still using the old one, I guess. I really don't know, so that's been a little bit frustrating. And we're expecting snow tonight, and I don't know if work's going to be open or closed tomorrow or what, but we're going to have to be ready for whatever. Finally got my GPS thingy updated last night. That was good, but then I forgot it when I needed it, so that was a pain. And it's not been a good week for driving because I've made 2 wrong turns and had to, take significantly longer ways around things because of it. Otherwise, I guess not much. Nothing particularly new video game-wise except for stuff for the show because I'm still playing Pokemon a lot mostly. So I think that's all I got.
All right.
Sorry, I'm a little bit off tonight.
I guess it's my turn. Let's see here. Not much going on my end either. Mostly, the last week has been consisting mostly of a lot of remodeling going on at work now. They seem to be mostly done with the addition to the store, and now they've began remodeling inside. They've been tearing some stuff down and working over that, and been some welding going on here and there as well. Hasn't really gotten in the way quite yet of employees and customers, but I have to wait and see how that goes. And gaming wise, been playing games for the show, and that's about it.
I guess it's my go. You can tell it's the post-holiday when there's jack shit going on in anyone's life. It's just everything returning back to normal. That's the big news.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my case, it's doing show things. Got to take my mom to the doctor tomorrow. She's like getting a breast cancer follow-up or something along those lines. It's like, they said they found a spot. It's so small that they're doing a second run thing. I don't know. It's like it's an infinitesimally small chance of like being malignant, but just being sure to be sure. and she's worried that she might be sedated for whatever reason, but she's just very new at this process. So, you know, like I said, not really worried about cancer or anything like that at this stage, but just being better safe than sorry. So, with that in mind, I believe we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week, well, hopefully, is both Shawn Ellis and Brian Rivers of Iron City Games.
Hi, everybody. This is Brian.
Hello. I guess Shawn still hasn't shown up yet.
Yeah, he may have gotten eaten by a zombie. I'm not sure yet. So we'll have to find out.
I think you may have some kind of echo going on in your space, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's possible. Getting a bit of feedback.
Yeah, not a problem, I guess.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, so how we'd like to get started is to get to know the people behind the game, behind the studio and whatnot. And we do that by asking them, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Hold on. What's that again?
What got you interested in video games, both personally and professionally? Like, how did you first come across video games, and how did you eventually make that into a job?
Oh, well, so I guess in the 1980s, my mama bought me a Tandy 1000 SL and a basic programming book, and that was about it. So it was, if you want games, write them yourself. So that's what got me into it. And I grew up playing Doom and Unreal Tournament and all these other games, and that just kind of inspired me to do this. But I've been modding and just writing games for fun for the last 30 years or so. So it's a passion. I also do other IT work and have a lot of experience in the space, but I always come back to the game development. It's a place where I can sink my creativity into.
Well, that makes sense, and not the first time we've ever heard that story of a modder going professional, so to speak. But I suppose, what was the specific catalyst for you to move over from modding games to making your own?
Well, I mean, it's conversations with Shawn. I've been modding for a while, but I think it was around the time where Epic was moving from Unreal 3 to Unreal 4, and just the tools that were available to build an entire game from scratch had really matured, and not to mention the fact that you could then distribute your content on Steam. So he and I got to talking, and this is just an opportunity to build something from scratch that kind of addresses some of the gaps we saw in the games that we were playing at the time, and allowed us to create something we really wanted to do. So it was more about creating this project and building the game we wanted to build than it was, hey, I want to start a career in game development.
Okay. And is Iron City Games like your first attempt at this, or have you worked elsewhere in the industry?
Nope. It's the first professional attempt at game development. Okay.
Once again, not a unique story, but less common than it's like I worked at the AAA game publisher and then decided to go indie for whatever reason.
Yeah, I guess everybody that's written the game wrote their first one, right?
At some point, But anyway, how long ago was this conversation? Or rather, how long have you been working on Gearstorm?
Embarrassingly, the conversation happened in 2013. So a two-man team taking on an ambitious project like Gearstorm, that took more time than we could have imagined.
Yeah. I mean, this is, from what I've seen from, everything, this is quite the ambitious project.
Yeah, we're insane.
Yeah. But for the uninitiated, what is Gearstorm exactly? What kind of game is it? What do you do, and all that good stuff?
Okay, so if you want to put it in a genre, it's an open world sci-fi sandbox. You want to compare it to other games, it's a mashup of Halo and Minecraft. So there have been a lot of survival games out there that use voxel technology, completely destructible worlds, that sort of thing. So we wanted to take that open world creativity experience that you got from Minecraft and layer on kind of the military simulation experience that Halo gives you. So combining those two concepts was really one of the drivers behind the development of Gearstorm. A few other games have played in this space, but really we've tried to add more depth to the gameplay, the combat mechanics, the quest system. The quest storyline has around 100 NPCs, 100 quests or so in there, and it's not just about exploring the world, it's about really engaging with the world and building your own base. So that's really what we wanted to create. And we're close to realizing it.
And you've been working on Gearstorm for 7 years, but is that active development, or is that coming up with...
Adam, you're not coming through at all while the thing is ringing.
Yeah, that was weird. What was that?
I think Shawn just joined us. Are you there, Shawn?
Yeah, I was here. Sorry, had a little technical difficulties on this side. Hadn't used Skype in some time. My apologies.
Fair enough. Okay. Right. So, Shawn, you're coming in a bit late, but I suppose we should get your background. How did you first get into video games? First as a personal endeavor and then as a professional pursuit.
Huh. Well, I'd say it goes back quite a ways to the old Commodore eras, when I was writing games on a Commodore 128, and I've always played games I've enjoyed, but I've always enjoyed kind of more the fringe, less of the mainstream games. Never played console. Always the more complex games that have more things you could do in them. Then as far as like gravitating towards the ones with the best graphics or the best sounds or things like that. So a bit of a gaming snob when it came to what I would play. And then this really represents my first adventure in the realm of actually producing something for other people. So pretty excited about it.
Right. And Brian was just telling us, the conceptualization of Gearstorm came about via your conversations. And what was your perspective on what you wanted to do with Gearstorm, why you wanted to make this game?
Well, at the time, Brian and I together actually were kind of going through games. Some of the ones I recall were, we were playing some Minecraft, some PlanetSide 2, an obscure Crisis mod called MechWarrior Living Legends. And each one of these we really enjoyed, but not for very long. And it just seemed like each of them was missing something. And, when we started talking about this, we were like, what if we made something unique that really just focused on what you could do in the game versus so much on what we see the other designers focusing on particular look and feel and things of that nature. So we had kind of a unique, what we felt like was a unique vision of mashing up a couple of these, basically a Minecraft with a lot of sci-fi equipment and guns and vehicles, if you will. And, we've just about made it happen now. So.
Indeed. And how does the collaboration between you two work exactly, given that you're both in a remote location?
I think it works fine. And Shawn and I have worked together in the same place off and on, but we're really close. We're good friends. We work together. And, technology is really supportive of us being able to collaborate.
Yeah, we've known each other for over 10 years, and so it's very, I would say, fast. We don't spend a lot of time hemming and hawing over things. Brian has his specialties. I have mine. We both know each other's really well, and we both kind of settle into what the other one's going to be authoritative for, and decision making is very fast compared to the rest of the other aspects of my life. I could say it's very fast.
I suppose things can be fast when there's only two of you.
Well, there's actually probably at any given time 10 to 20 of us. So a lot of people say, well, how in the world did you make a game with just two people? Well, the straight answer is we really didn't. I mean, we paid, Brian and I both self-fund this game. We're very passionate about it. And for the last 5 to 7 years, we've put our own salaries behind this game to the tune of, tens of thousands of dollars a year in consulting fees. And, we pay artists, we pay effects people, we pay audio people, we pay animators, we pay we pay a lot. So at any given time, we might have a 3-ring circus of 6-8 consultants going, and I think that's where our management training comes in. That I think a lot of other indie game developers kind of lack. I mean, they're really good developers. They're really good at coding, or at animation, or with the engine, or whatever, but they don't know how to manage people. And I think that's the number one thing that's made Brian and I as successful as we have been, is that we can manage people, and that's really what it takes.
Yeah, we've got some really good, loyal friends that have been with us for years, helping us do beta testing and giving us feedback. So it's not just paid consulting time. Some of these contractors have been with them for a while too, but there are others that really have helped us to move this along. So I don't want to leave them out.
Oh yeah.
And how many people are working on the game these days?
At this moment, we have about 5. We have a really good creative artist who's helped us to develop the story. He's kind of in a holding pattern the last few weeks. And we've got a couple of other art productions going on with some pretty much our concept, our 2D artists and our 3D artists. Those guys have been with us for about 5 years. I mean, we pay them on an individual contract basis, but they're really reliable, and they've been engaged with us for a while. We've backed off on the outsourced C++, and frankly, it's because it's hard to find someone that can just jump in and do your code. So a lot of the 99.x% of the code in the game is written by myself and Shawn.
Yeah, I will say that's probably the other biggest thing. Managing people is the biggest thing, but being the owners and coders, primary coders of the game, because that's what glues everything together, is the code, is a huge linchpin for us. Like, I don't think we'd be anywhere without that if we weren't the coders as well.
So I will say, thanks to Epic as well, because we didn't just build this from assembly. There's a lot available in the Unreal Engine that we can get started with. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it does so much. But it is also very complex and hard to understand. I'd say I'm still learning about it every day. It's a moving target, too.
Right. And was there any particular reason you chose the Unreal Engine over, say, Unity?
Oh, performance, stability, lack of bugs. Physics. What else, Brian?
I've been developing in the Unreal Engine, the whole modding backstory. I've written mods for Unreal 99. It goes all the way back to the framework of the engine. It's really just impressed us. And when we started working on Gearstorm, we actually started developing in Unreal 3. So we go back before the Unreal 4 engine even came out. And when Epic came out with it and the new price model, because Unreal 3 had a pretty big cut for the cost, it was a no-brainer for us. We had to do it. I mean, no taking anything away from Unity. People love the games that are developed in it, but we really wanted that first-person shooter experience, and we felt like an engine that grew up delivering that was the best choice for us.
I will say too, Gearstorm really rides the edge on performance. So we make full use of multi-threading, the GPU for more than just rendering graphics, and having that C++ compiled code gives us that edge to do a lot more with the machine than you can with a lot of other engines, just because we're a lot closer to the hardware with C++. Our net code, our GPU code, and our multi-threading code are extremely tight, and we still tax a machine on every single core because we're doing so much that's kind of unique to a lot of games. A very large, destructible world that's also 20 by 20 kilometers is a lot to track for a PC.
It sounds like it. And I suppose along the lines of Epic, did they ever approach you about having your this Gearstorm game on the Epic Game Store?
We're having conversations with them about that right now, but that's not a done deal yet. I mean, when we started this, Epic's Game Store wasn't even a thing. So we went kind of full in on Steam integration, Steam server searches, and that sort of thing. And we'd love to be able to migrate this over to Epic Store as well. It's just a bit of work on our hands to get that done.
All right. Yeah, it's like these storefronts are their own platforms and all that.
Right.
And anyway, so this game recently entered into early access. How complete of a state is it in terms of content, in terms of bug fixes? How long do you plan on being in early access, and all that jazz?
Well, I'd say we were a lot further ahead than most of what either of us had seen come out in early access. In terms of every feature we wanted in the game, like the vehicle simulation, the voxel system, the building, the whole machine automation system, the colony building system with people you could give orders to, all that worked.
In-game quest editing, game mode, game master editing features.
Mode,
yeah, we wanted that kind of polish to be available. We felt like that was what our differentiator was. When we come out of early access is when we've convinced the world that, we've got a game that's solid and not buggy. So we've got a little bit of learning there to do to make sure we're delivering what we're promising here. But we are a lot closer than some of the games that I have bought and played and have been abandoned.
Yeah, both of our careers have kind of beat into us. Two things. One is that people promise stuff and don't deliver it. So we really didn't want to release something that didn't have already an example of every single thing we were promising. There's nothing that's not in Gearstorm that we won't have already there. And then the second thing is the quality of it. It has to work right every single time. So we're extremely intolerant of bugs, performance issues. I mean, that's where our real focus is most of the time. So yes, we heard about some bugs when we went early access because people tried it with a lot of different things than we had tried and kind of put it through its paces. And that's where our focus has been over the last month or so, is to get those knocked out so that we have a stable platform to move forward on.
Yeah, that sounds like pretty typical early access stuff. And switching over to like the actual, the game content side of the equation, like what's the story of Gearstorm? Who are you? What's your faction? What's going on here?
So we've had some really good authors that have kind of worked with us to develop this story over the years. So basically, Gearstorm set in the far future. You've escaped Earth, escaping essentially a genetically engineered zombie virus that you assumed would wipe the Earth out. Heading for another planet, thinking that you're pretty much the only one that's going to make it there. When you arrive, you realize that no, Earth has survived. There are many factions that have moved and moved faster than you because technology developed, and you arrive at a populated world that has many different factions, many different issues, and they manage to bring that virus with them. So it's set in a far sci-fi future, many generations of technology. The apocalypse in this case has had an apocalypse. And now you're picking up the pieces and rebuilding civilization again.
And who are the factions that you would encounter on this planet?
There's three main factions. You are the International Continental Alliance, or Colonial Alliance, sorry. And basically your base was set on the moon, and you left from that location as it fell to the phage virus as well, and arrived. And basically there are two factions that have already set up roots there are the Earth Defense Initiative, which basically is what emerged from the fall of Earth, and then the Mars Science Foundation. So all of those factions have NPCs, have their own colonies already existing on the base. There are missions to interact with those. And those factions have also splintered into multiple different locations as well. So there's 7 or 8 different cities on the map, with different leaders, of course, that give you quests and challenges to interact with the world. That's our campaign mode, of course. If you don't like any of that, then just switch to survival. You'll drop pod somewhere on an abandoned island, fighting monsters and zombies and building your society from scratch. You can spawn your NPCs and build your base and do all of that without the encumbrance of having to do quests for NPCs.
So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to do in this game.
There's a lot to do in this game.
And let me see. So what made you want to do the destructible terrain thing outside of like Minecraft? Like, or rather, how did you implement this technology?
I did a lot of reading. That was the main thing. There's lots of information out there on procedural world generation, on voxel terrain system, on real-time procedural mesh generation. A lot of these technologies that we implemented them hot off the presses. When Epic implemented procedural mesh generation, or procedural mesh generation in 4.6, that's when we jumped on implementing it in our game as well. So we felt like that this could lead to us building very large worlds, very complex worlds like cave systems and dungeons and that sort of thing that Epic's current terrain system doesn't really support well. And we wanted it to be destructible. You wanted to harvest and collect materials. And a lot of the games out there, there's just either a location where you can find a lump sticking out of the ground and you can harvest that. Or there's a place where you can go and collect materials, but we wanted the entire world to be harvestable. You collect dirt, you collect hay, you can tie that hay into a rope. That dirt you can put in planters and grow trees. So everything in Gearstorm is usable.
But what happens if you mine all of the ground?
Mathematically, the universe freezes over or burns up. I'm not sure how the universe comes to an end. But there are as many voxels as there are integers in a 32-bit integer.
Okay.
So, yeah, the voxel system, our editable terrain system is one of our biggest technical challenges we faced over the last 5 years because we wanted it really big, like 20 by 20 kilometers, multiplayer, and very deep, very you can dig very deep into it.
Yeah, there's cities simulating on top of it with NPCs in them as well. So all of that's going on, and that's why it's going to be a challenge for some of these machines.
Yeah, but what it lets us do is you flatten out a section for your base. Like you dig a flat spot for it, or you dig a whole base underground. We have people that have dug out and hollowed out entire mountains for their base. You blow holes in the ground when you shoot it. You know, it feels more real.
Now, is there a building component to this game?
Absolutely. That's one of the more interesting things about the game. If you've ever played it and you see these bases, you're talking to NPCs right now on your screen, all that was built by the player. The NPC was placed by the player. When we got in there and set all that up, we wrote those dialogues and scripts, that was an interface in the game itself. So we just went to a spawn pad, spawned the NPCs, used our build gun that he's talking about right now on the screen to build that base that he's in. And we use the in-game quest editing tools to write that quest. So the entire game.
Everything about our campaign was done by a player in game, and that's really the game master mode Brian briefly mentioned. It's really big for us because you can log into our game, change the damage, range, rate of fire, everything about weapons, vehicles, right there in the game, and it instantly changes for everybody connected to your server. And you can make your own quests, your own stories, and everybody instantly gets them. So you can set up. That's why we called it a game master, not just server admin. You can set up these quests and stories for your friends, have LAN parties, or for just the general public that use your server, and they're unique to you. As your game master, you're creating your own world, and you get to change almost everything about the game, and it changes instantly for everybody that's connected.
Indeed, and how many people can be on the server at once?
Well, we theorized about that. we've had, how many have we had maximum on our testing, Brian?
So 12's been the most that we've tested on. We want to make sure that before we come out of early access that we can guarantee 16 and what the platform looks like for that. But I mean, with our multi-threaded technology, it's really limited by the hardware. Memory is fairly cheap these days, and we've done a lot of compression to handle that. But with modern hardware, running a dedicated server for 12 players is doable. If you want to host a game on your own machine, then 3 or 4 is probably what you want to shoot for. But we've had 5 or 6 running on a player-hosted machine as well.
Yeah, like an i9 or something. The 12 players we hosted on, I think that was a 4-core server that I have. Of course, people know there's 32-core servers out there, pretty cheap. So, like Brian said, it scales up pretty much with the processor. So we haven't really stress tested it to see if 50 people can play on one map, but theoretically it's possible with a big enough server.
I'd imagine that somebody at some point might try that, just because it's something to be tried.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's somebody does first.
I will say it is our vision to one day have lots of dedicated servers that have 50 plus players per server. Because this world is so big, it's 20 by 20 kilometers, and we plan to have mini maps come out. That we wanted that big, so players that have places to put their bases and set up their stuff and hoard their ill-gotten gains. So that's the exact reason we wanted such a big world.
Right, and in terms of the actual multiplayer, is it co-op or is there PvP play as well?
Both. We've designed the campaign mode for co-op. And it's the same situation you'd see in a game like Minecraft or open world. People want to play the way they want to play. So we didn't really want to tie people's hands in that. You can set up. There's a lot of co-op support. You can set up your squad. There's squad chat. There's squad indicators on your mini maps. You can allow your squad to add to access your base or your loot or not. So there's lots of options there to support in-game teaming as well as just full co-op. Everybody on the server is the same team. Me, my wife, and my kids, we play Gearstorm all the time, and that's definitely a co-op experience there. The kids will get themselves into trouble we have to go bail them out of.
Oh, that's good. And what are the options in terms of character customization?
Well, I'm working on phase 2 of that right now. You've got 20 different options for male, 20 different options for female, head selections. Right now, everybody's got a shaved head, and a number of folks have said that's got to get fixed. So I'm working on having more of the detailed options like skin tone selection, eye color selection, hairdo, hair color. All that's being in the works right now. But again, we just wanted a solid game. The other thing that's there is there are several different suits of armor, several different helmets. You can pick different camos for your armor. So there are many different ways to outfit your character and customize it and make it your own.
And what sort of classes do you have in the game?
Our game is classless, so you start the game as a soldier in the ICA army in the campaign, and you have access to any features that any other player would have. We're considering introducing some specializations, but it's more akin to what you'd see in a Fallout, where you're customizing your character's interaction with the world and not necessarily having a mage or a cleric or an engineer or a demolitions expert.
Okay. And let me see here. In terms of pricing, the game is currently $12. Is that early access pricing, or is that, like when this game eventually becomes 1.0, is that going to be the price as well?
Well, frankly, it depends on the market. We don't want to sell a game for a price that people don't want to pay. Our goal really is to sell a game that people enjoy at a rate that works for them. So I don't have a problem going 1.0 at $12. I do think that as we introduce more content and if the community demonstrates that, hey, we're enjoying this game, the market's going to drive the price up. But again, our focus is not on making a ton of money here. Our focus is making a good game.
Yeah, our ability to sustain ourselves and our families not wrapped up in this game. Both Brian and I, we have other sources of income. We really started this thing to make something that people would love, and not necessarily something that's commercially acceptable. It's like often we'll have conversations. Well, let's do what the other people wouldn't do. I mean, it's not that some of the bigger companies aren't capable of doing what we're doing. They have people that can do these things. They just won't. They won't give players total control over their weapons, how much damage they do, how their vehicles move, how fast they are, like to be able to instantly change that in game, change up all their story and everything. They just wouldn't give that much control to a game master, to a player. So that's kind of been one of our philosophies is we're free. We're free from all that, commercial drive. Let's make something that people really love.
Yeah, so we do want the game to be self-sustaining. We've got a lot of folks that have been part of this, the contractors again, that we're paying out of pocket right now. And we would like for Gearstorm's profit to make sure that it covers those margins to keep us developing and adding new armors, adding new maps, adding new character features. We really want this thing to keep moving as opposed to just being a game that's finished once we go 1.0.
And in terms of like the actual computer platforms, is this game Windows only, or do you have Mac and Linux builds as well?
Right now, we're focusing on Windows only, Windows and Steam. Again, we just want to make sure that we've got it fixed and everything works the way we expected to. There'll be some performance passes as well, of course, some optimization. Once we have a solid foundation and we're certain that this is going to port well, then we're going to have the port branching out. I think the concern would be if we port too early, then now we've got multiple different forks to provide some in-depth technical support to. And we're getting good feedback from the releases that we've got. So yeah, we'd love to be able to support Linux as an example. And that day is definitely around the corner if the world wants it. But right now we're focusing on getting the core mechanics of the game working well. And the Unreal Engine, it does a great job of supporting application portability. We're too big for consoles right now. There's too much going on. There's too much CPU and memory consumption, but the consoles are going to catch up. So we'll keep an eye on those as well.
Right. Because there's a couple out here. Anyway, I've run through my gamut of questions. I'll turn to my colleagues here to see if they have any additional ones at this point.
I think all mine have been answered.
Well, before we started, you mentioned the game has like some basic controller support. I was wondering if you have any plans for increasing that at any point, because I know you do have a system that obviously allows you to do a lot of stuff on a kind of all of the customizability you've got. But
Yeah, that would be a prerequisite to console port, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's definitely on our list. Wide monitor support, 8K support. These are all things that have been asked of us as well, and they are definitely on the list of things to improve on. The controller support, obviously, if you see the menu system, it's really mouse driven. There's lots of drag and drop and features like that. But yes, we want to support the controllers more because that's been a very popular ask.
Okay. Anything else, Alex?
not really.
Okay.
Looks like a pretty interesting setup, even though it's definitely not the kind of game I have the most experience with.
Okay. Twilight?
All of my questions have been answered.
All right, then. Well, I'd like to thank you both for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today. Your game looks really interesting, and hopefully your early access polish goes well.
We really appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out to us and giving us the time.
No problem. No
yeah, it's
problem.
great to meet you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Glad to help. Anyway, the game is Gearstorm. It's currently available on Steam in early access. It currently retails for $11.99. Be sure to pick it up today. And Petty, play us to the next segment. All right. So it's January, and it being January, it means that there's fuck all happening in the video game world. Well, I suppose I can't say that because there are things happening. There's the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion pass and the inflammation of Pokemon tensions, but really don't want to fucking talk about that. Like, there's Sony seemingly ditching the E3 conference for good.
Yeah.
That's a thing that,
Well, certainly they're ditching it for again, and I want, like, is it just the PS5 isn't going to be ready, or?
No, they have said they are not going to be at E3. They are not going to have a conference. They are not going to have a booth presence.
Well, right, but I'm just wondering if that's going to be because they don't have the PS5 ready yet, or if they did, if they would be there.
No, the PS5 is going to be shown off this year. No, it's like there's apparently Sony has a beef with the ESA over a something or other, but we don't really know, and we don't really know the full implications of this. This could be the death. This could be the move that kills off E3, or it's something that hurts Sony and the PlayStation 5. There's no way to, or it could be just a blip in the road. It's too hard to say. There's the Smash character reveal that's happening tomorrow, but that's tomorrow. So my point is, there's things happening, but it's really not enough. There's really not anything out there for us to talk about for an entire segment. So we're going obscure because once again it's January. And we are going to be talking about Nintendo, specifically a Nintendo developer. A Nintendo developer, you probably played one of their games at one point or another, but you probably don't really think of them or know them unless you really know the company structure. And that's the Nintendo Software Technology Corporation, or the NSTC, or NST, however you want to abbreviate it. And who they are is they are Nintendo's first non-Japanese development group. Yes, they actually precede Retro Studios by a good couple of years. They got their start in 1998. Retro Studios was bought out in 2001, 2002, somewhere along those lines. And real terms, NST's been a lot more of a workhorse than Retro. It's just,
the NST games typically don't get the limelight that retro games get. Like, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's hard to say. It's just, usually NST is working on, smaller affairs. Although to which the extent of the smallness has shifted over the years. Anyway, NST was founded in the late 90s in order to facilitate development for the North American market, primarily. But given the games that they've worked on, it's definitely, these games were definitely released most of the time internationally, or at least in PAL territories. And, they got their start, developing an unusual thing. They did the Bionic Commandos Elite Forces game for the Game Boy Color. It's like the not too well remembered sequel, or at least one of the sequels to Bionic Commando. Like, it's like, personally never played that one. It looked weird. It's like, I really don't have an actual opinion on Elite Forces. Other games from that year, they did the absolutely fucking horrible Game Boy Color port of Crystallis.
Oh god, that happened, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Crystallis is the Game Boy Color port of Crystallis should be more infamous than it is. Like, it's not necessarily NST's fault. Because like all Nintendo teams and collaborators, they get their marching orders from Japan. It's like, but the problem with at least one of the big problem with the Game Boy Color port of Crystallis is the fucking swords. So if you ever played Crystallis, one of the big things is you use elemental swords, and it works like any elemental system would. It's like you use the right sword on the enemy to do the requisite amount of damage. It's not a hard concept, but for whatever reason, they decided that all the elemental swords basically lost their elemental ability. They'll all do equal damage.
Oh, fun.
Do you see the fucking problem?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it made boss fights a fucking slog. Really made fighting a fucking slog. And yeah, don't fucking buy or ever play this piece of shit ever. Yeah, it's like I have axes to grind against this.
You can tell.
I'm like, look, Crystallis is honestly probably the best Zelda game on the NES. And that includes Star Tropics.
I have to agree.
I mean, for fuck's sakes, Crystallis was doing 8-way direction combat on the NES. No leaps in hardware required for this game. And just chat all over it. They also did the Ridge Racer 64, which was, weird remix hybrid thing. It was some tracks from Ridge Racer and Ridge Racer Innoventions, if I'm remembering correctly, and a couple of new tracks. Of course, mind you, this game had 5 tracks. That was a problem with N64 racers in general. Just you're only gonna get 5 tracks at most. I'm like, oh, but we can reverse it, and that increases the count to 10. Fucking hated that shit. I'm glad we've moved on from, single digits of track listings in racing games, realistic or otherwise. Yeah. Let's see. Anyway, they would quickly move on to bigger and better things, as they were the developers of the N64 version of Pokemon Puzzle League. Arguably the best of the Pokemon, or not Pokemon, the best of the Puzzle League games.
The Tetris Attack / Panel Upon ones.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
See, the Pokemon Puzzle League added 4-player versus play. Added, the added power. Like you could rotate the tower now, or the play field. If I'm remembering correctly. I think this is the one that did that. The gameplay is actually faster because it's on a more powerful system than the Super NES. That kind of thing. Like, honestly, I recommend picking this one up on the Virtual Console. Like, it's either this or Planet Puzzle League that's the greatest Puzzle League game, and I stand by that. I know some people prefer the classic Panel de Pon Tetris Attack, and they're fine. That's a fine game. I'm just saying, I think some of the later entries did it better. Make that what you will. And after that, we hit the GameCube era, and we hit Nintendo Software Technologies height in terms of profile, because you can see what they were developing. It's like some Game Boy Color ports, some some name stuff, but not exactly headlining material. But GameCube era, they started off with Wave Race Blue Storm. Granted, that's a game that's kind of forgotten these days, but it was one of the headlining launch titles for the GameCube. It's just people it wasn't as beloved as the original Wave Race 64. Not exactly sure why, and this game was overshadowed by everything else that was releasing, Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, Super Smash Brothers, Melee. But still, this game did have a place in the lineup, and they moved. They continue on with the Extreme Sports with 1080 Degrees Avalanche, another sequel to an N64 Extreme Sports title that also isn't talked about all that much. And it's like I'm not sure what that says about the games in particular, but they seemed like solid affairs. I mean, I enjoyed Avalanche back in the day. I mean, it wasn't as good as the SSX games, but still. Anyway, and then we come to what's the NST's signature franchise. Maybe not intended that way, but it's certainly the one that if you know them, you probably know them for this franchise, and that's the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. They have been the developers of every Mario versus or Mario and Donkey Kong game since the first one. And personally, like, I really enjoyed the first one, mainly because that was really in line with Donkey Kong 94, or Donkey Kong for the Game Boy. Was I the only one who played that?
I think so.
I think I played it. My memory's blurry of the NES days.
It's not the NES, it's the Game Boy.
Game Boy? Oh.
Yeah. No, it's like Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong for the Game Boy is a great game. Maybe one of the greatest games of all time. Absolutely, you should go get that from the Virtual Console. And I think Mario vs. Donkey Kong is on the Virtual Console for the Wii U. Or I might be thinking of its sequel. Because I know, Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS titles are on the Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
So the accessibility of getting these games is a bit, dodgier. It'd be nice if Nintendo would get the more advanced systems on the fucking Nintendo Switch there, instead of just digging around with the same old Super NES and NES games. But regardless, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, I think, is still the best in the series, but that's mainly because I didn't like the direction that the sequels went. It's like, starting with Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2, it was less a puzzle platform game, the vein of Donkey Kong. It was more something along the lines of Lemmings, where you had direct control of the mini Marios and you had to direct them.
Yeah.
It's like, It was okay. Not gonna lie, I didn't hate it, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. Also coming out around this time, they did the DS version of Ridge Racers, which was just a port of the Nintendo 64 version of Ridge Racer. I'm like, yeah, that was a weird time for the DS when we got a few Nintendo 64 games. Although arguably this game worked out better than the Super Mario 64 DS port. Look, I'm sorry, you just need an analog controller to play a 3D platformer.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of awkward to control ideas, maybe their most well-known game, maybe not, Metroid Prime Hunters. They were actually the primary developer on this title because Retro was busy with, if I'm recalling correctly, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. They were kind of busy with the big boy game, so NST got to handle the handheld, not spin-off, but interquel.
Which is apparently fine, but, not what people wanted.
Well, it wasn't a backlash like, Metroid Prime Federation Force was. Mm-hmm. It's like, there was a lot of head scratching around this release because, it's a first-person shooter on the Nintendo DS.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as awkward to control as you think it is. Like, it's workable, but, it's not a thing I would recommend. Also, like, the game in general is weird because this was Nintendo's take on Quake 3 Arena. Not even joking about that. Like, it's got a single-player campaign, but that wasn't the focus. And if you've ever played the game, you'll know it wasn't really the focus. It's not, once again, it's not terrible, but it's not great either. The multiplayer was the focus. Of course, you can't actually play this game in the multiplayer these days because if you remember, this game was powered by Nintendo Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. And, the Nintendo Wi-Fi for Wii and DS no longer exists. So I guess you could still try to do that locally. Good luck with that.
Well, some people have been making, like, servers that you can connect to and basically still use some of the Wi-Fi functionalities.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that might work with Hunters. It's just, another thing with DS games was, they were unsecure as fuck, so cheating was just fucking rampant.
Mm-hmm.
Who remembers snaking? I do. Mm-hmm. And this is also around the time when they hit the big snag. They were around the time of like 2006 to 2009, the late 2000s, Wii era. They were working on a game called Project Hammer, also known as Wii Crush. This game went through a few permutations, but the core concept was always the same. Basically, what if Wii Remote simulated a hammer motion?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, not the most complicated thing to get across, but apparently there was a big split in terms of which direction do we go into? Because once again, this is the Wii era. So, from what it said, upper management thought they should make this a more casual focused game. The thing is, apparently a lot of time and resources went into making this a more hardcore title. And, apparently the gameplay suffered because of it. Allegations of racism were thrown around. White racism. I'm not actually joking about this. Apparently the Caucasian developers felt that the Japanese management staff were being racist towards them. I'm like, yes, white racism can happen. It's exceedingly rare because of power structures in this nation, but this is a situation where it could happen. I can't update it, but this is just what was alleged.
Anyway, given all this, Project Hammer really didn't go anywhere, and it, basically puttered around for about 3 years before being unceremoniously shit-canned in 2009. And that seems to be where, how to put this, the Nintendo Software Technology Corporation was fairly lobotomized because, I've detailed what they were working on beforehand, during this time and, later. Okay, 2007, they did the Nintendo 64 portion of the Wii Virtual Console. This is also their foray into non-gaming gaming expenditures. Now, that's weird to say, but, they developed one of the emulators for the Wii Virtual Console. Not the only thing that they would do, but more on that in a bit. And then 2008, they developed, or at least co-developed, Crosswords, or Crosswords DS. The way Nintendo has it, it's Crosswords with the DS enhanced.
Yeah, Crossword DS.
Yeah, it's like, I'll just go with Crosswords DS because it sounds, more communicative of the idea.
Right.
This was the problem with Nintendo's messaging. Maybe not at this time, but, you can see the foreshadowing of the Wii U right here, people. It's like, this is branding that's too cute and clever for its own good.
Really? Not that. Well, it's not like this was the first. This is just, I don't know.
I know.
It's not that much different from like every goddamn game on the Super Nintendo having Super in it, every goddamn game on the N64 ending in 64, and practically every franchise entry on the DS having a title that somehow used the initials DS.
Well, here's the thing. It's using DS as part of the word. It's not Crosswords DS technically. It's Crossword capital DS.
Right.
It's more along the lines of Deadly Silence or Dawn of Sorrows. You're working the
Dark
DS.
Sun or Django and Savata.
Anyway.
Dragon Soul.
Anyway. And then 2009, they did a whole bunch of, really small projects. Mario versus Donkey Kong Mini Smarch again. This is probably the biggest project that they did. This is the third Mario versus Donkey Kong game. Like I said, no matter how big or small, and trust me, the Mario versus Donkey Kong games do get smaller. They were always the developer there. They did the Mario Clock and Calculator for the Nintendo DSiWare. And the Animal Crossing Clock and Calculator for the Nintendo DSiWare. Yeah, it's like, this is what they've been...
I mean, someone has to program them.
I guess, but it's like... This also came out in 2009? Like, 2 years into the smartphone era? Like I could... I guess it's because the DSiWare was a thing by then, but, we were kind of over using the DS as things other than a gaming device.
I mean, a lot of that stuff was like available for free, so it was like something to use for, or not for free, but
yeah,
as like rewards for Club Nintendo or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like at that time also, kids didn't really have smartphones because they were way too expensive.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the video on demand framework used for the BBC iPlayer. We're getting very specific now. And let's see, 2010, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Miniland Mayhem. Another Mario vs. Donkey Kong game. I honestly didn't realize that they put out this many Mario vs. Donkey Kong games on the DS. They did a Nintendo DSiWare game called Aura Climber, which I'm not really sure what is. I'm sure...
I suspect it involves climbing.
Well, I mean, beyond that. Let's see, 2011, they did the Kirby TV channel for the Nintendo Wii, which showed the Kirby Right Back At Ya series. 2012's, they did Crosswords Plus for the Nintendo 3DS. No cute wordplay here, just Crosswords Plus. 2013, Nintendo Web Framework. Probably their most notable project around this time, because what the Nintendo Web Framework was, that was the development kit that allowed really small indie developers to make games in HTML5 for the Nintendo Wii U. It's how we got all those terrible RC Maniacs games.
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Yeah, we actually had them on the show once, although that was like around the time of their first release. You know, before they accrued the reputation. Let's see, Mario and Donkey Kong Minis on the Move, which I think is a downloadable Mario vs. Donkey Kong game. 2015, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Tipping Stars. And you know, it's like, you can see what I'm getting at here. Like, outside of the Mario vs. Donkey Kong franchise, you know, what else are they doing? You know, they're doing some very specific non-gaming applications. They're doing DSiWare titles. You know, they're co-developing crossword puzzle games. You know, not bad work, but it's a far cry from, you know, powering Nintendo's maybe not top-tier franchises, but still, you know, at least B level, as opposed to like D or E level. Like, you know, at least that's my estimation on the situation. You know, I will grant I do not have insider knowledge about the inner workings of NST, so, you know, if a developer was just to correct me, I'm all ears.
Mm-hmm.
It is curious.
But now we enter their current fate, which is doing ports. They are the developers of Super Mario Maker for the Nintendo 3DS, alongside Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge. But
Super Mario Maker without half the features you want?
well, without the critical features. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure. Once again, I'm not sure if that's on NST. And you know, in 2018, they did the Nintendo Switch and 3DS versions of Captain Toad's Treasure Trackers. You know, once again, not the most exciting porting work in the world. You know, it's not porting, say, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but it's still fairly notable software here, especially Super Mario Maker for the 3DS. And, you know, not listed on their website, but apparently they also did assist work for Snipper Clips Plus, which was the retail version of that game. And they also helped out with the Stretchers. If you don't know what the Stretchers is, it is a action puzzle game, well, involving medical stretchers. It came out. Yeah, it just came out of literal nowhere. Like, just one Friday, Nintendo's like, hey, here's a brand new game. It's available now. Why don't you go download it? No, we're not going to fucking market this because reasons. I mean, I hear it's a good game, but, you know, Nintendo just threw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, overall assessment of the Nintendo Software Technology Corporation, once again, they're kind of the workhorse of the owned Nintendo family. You know, it's like there are developers that are affiliates that I'd put on this level, you know, like Next Level Games. Maybe Intelligent Systems would be a bit higher, you know, HAL Labs, that kind of deal. Mm-hmm. Now, they're not working on the prime time stuff, at least not right now, unless you count the Mario versus Donkey Kong games as such. Maybe like the, you know, for the DS or the Game Boy Advance, like there was definitely a diminishing return on this franchise because Like the 3DS version was download only. Tipping Stars was download only. At least over here, like it got a box, but it was a download code.
Yeah. Tipping Stars was also really weird. It had the weird in-game economy where everything was based on like recommendations of your levels and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Tipping Star was mainly a kind of a demo of the Nintendo Web Framework engine, to show what it could do. But it was important that was like Nintendo's first cross-play feature, in the sense that if you bought one version of the game, you'd get the other version in a download code. Anyway, but yeah, it's like hopefully given what they've worked on recently, that they could work on bigger projects again. Again, I don't think there's that much of a risk of them developing like another BBC iPlayer. And also according to Wikipedia, they did, they helped out with the Wii U chat feature, which was co-developed by a few other players, including Nintendo Entertainment, Research, and Development, or NERD. I swear to God, this is what their acronym lines up to. And yes, that was.
I think it's a good acronym.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it was Nintendo European Research and Development.
And still nerd.
Yes. And this was actually a company that they bought, and you probably saw their logo if you owned a lot of DS games or Game Boy Advance. MobiClip, Actimagine. Anyone remember these guys?
MobiClip, barely. I remember.
They were one of the codec companies.
Mm-hmm.
Or middleware companies. They show, like, I definitely remember their logo showing up in like some DS games.
Yeah.
And apparently they also did Wii Street U, which was the weird Nintendo Wii U version of Google Street. Nintendo was Nintendo was kind of a hot mess during the Wii U era, in case you couldn't tell. Anyway, like I said, I've always had a soft spot for this developer most of the time. Once again, eyeing you, Crystalis. But, hopefully, hopefully that they get to develop, something beyond a port or co-development. Or, if they do another Mario versus Donkey Kong game, can you ratchet up the scale a bit rather than just a small downloadable thing? And can you make it like the first game? Look, I just want another one of these. Anyway, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments Silicon. The week ahead, let's see. There is no show scheduled this Friday, so yay to that. On Sunday, on the Sunday reviews, we will be having reviews for 64.0. My Friend is a Raven, and Queen's Wish the Conqueror. So look forward to that. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.